Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying EDS Reconnect. My name's Alan Hart, and I'm going to be talking about treasure maps and minefields. This is a new talk I put together for this event, but it draws on things I've learnt over a number of years. Hopefully, there'll be some bits of it that are new to you. Perhaps there'll be some bits you've seen before. But it's about using structured approaches to better create and evaluate new product ideas as you're trying to innovate in a product range. So I'll start just by saying a little bit about who I am and who 42 Technology is. Alan Hart, I've been working in innovation consulting on and off for about 15 years, mostly helping multinational companies to invent and develop new products. In the middle, amongst that experience, I was an entrepreneur for about 10 years, working on developing and commercializing an actual product. So I have sort of had these challenges in front of me myself, as well as a consultant. My background originally is as a physicist. I did a physics PhD. And when I'm not being an innovation consultant, I'm being a snowboarder, or wishing I was snowboarding, or just being a dad and riding a cargo trike around Cambridge. A little bit about 42 Technology. We are an innovation and new product development consultancy. We're based just outside Cambridge. We tend to specialize in technical challenges. We've been around for about 25 years. We've got almost 50 people. And I suppose the core skills tend to be around physics, mechanical engineering, also manufacturing and automation. Of course, to be any sort of good product development firm, you need to have good electronics and software. And to be good at developing products, you also need to have good design skills in-house. Some industries also have regulatory requirements that products have to fit in with. And so that is also an area that we tend to deal with as well, for example, in healthcare. We do pretty much everything from customer insight and trying to uncover unmet needs through to designing products, detailed design, transfer to manufacture. And having said that, there are some things that we're a bit more known for. We tend to be known for that area around invention and reduction to practice, actually making stuff work in the lab. I think in that particular area, we are a world-class player. Today, I'm talking about the process of innovation and how we go about coming up with ideas and improving ideas for products. So I'm going to start just by, I suppose, reflecting on what's changed, on innovations that have happened in the last, let's say, 20 years. We're in the early 2020s now, and it's funny to think back. A lot of aspects of life, the trappings of certainly our tech lives anyway, a lot of those trappings are quite similar to the way they were in the early 2000s. I mean, yes, obviously, there have been some big commercially impactful innovations between then and now, and we'll talk about some of those, but a lot of it is not so different. So, I'm presenting this from a Dell laptop on Wi-Fi using PowerPoint. I've used Google multiple times today, and I've got orders, coming to my house using Amazon. And all that stuff is still the same. And it's funny to think that 20 years ago, we had all of that, but we didn't have, for example, smartphones for the most part. And if you think about some of the things that have changed, I mean, Netflix is an interesting one. 20 years ago, if Netflix even existed, it was a physical DVD rental service, effectively. The iPhone and then Android came in starting around 2007. And I think an interesting one to think about is Tesla. I haven't studied for this talk the exact date Tesla was founded, but I can tell you that electric cars were not a thing in the early 2000s. And a lot of people say, oh, they're just a very niche thing today. But the fact is, Tesla is, if not one of the most valuable companies in the world because of what they've done. They really have started to mainstream the electric vehicle. And an awful lot of innovation's gone into that. And you can see the impact, the infrastructure that's going up around those vehicles in the world that we see every day. Tesla charging site here, visible on this slide. So to come up with these sorts of impactful innovations, does that need to hinge on genius individuals? Do you have to have your own gifted all-rounder entrepreneur to be able to do what Tesla's done? Or do you need, for a science-based innovation, do you need a Nobel-level scientist? Do you need a digital prophet who believes he can see the future and can understand what's coming down the road? And I suppose another way of asking this question is product innovation a black box that has mysterious internal workings and which just spits out product development activities so that products will eventually start to emerge downstream of this black box, and those products will then be put into manufacture and a business will result? Or can we start to think about what's inside that black box? Can we get away from the idea that innovation has to come from elite creativity, bolts from the blue? Can we actually do things to help us innovate when those people are either not in our organization or perhaps not having their best day or not always available, or just to go beyond what we can do with the team that we have? So I'm going to try and talk a little bit about a structured approach to some of the activities inside this black box, and I'll break those down for a moment now. The model I've drawn up here is not the model that you have to use for what goes on inside product innovation. It's not, I wouldn't say it's not even 42T's model, it's not even my model, but it's the model that I've put together for this talk, and I think it's a good enough model to allow us to talk about what goes inside the black box. So I've highlighted four main activities. I think firstly, when companies know that they need to do something, they want to do something new, they need to dream, they need to imagine the things that are going to be in their product lines in 5, 10 years, maybe 1-2 years away. And there are lots of things that can inspire those dreams, but they can imagine where their brand could be taken. They can imagine where an evolution of their current product might be possible to get to. But they also need to listen, because if you dream up future products in the absence of a true understanding of what customers want, you're probably not going to be completely successful. And so I've drawn in parallel a second stream there, which is about listening to customers. Now, it's not always literally listening, but it's about getting under the skin of how customers feel about products, what their unmet needs are, and trying to capture those needs in a structured way, so that once you've got some ideas about what the future products might be and an understanding of what the unmet needs are, you can try to refine those needs, which is the next step I've highlighted, to do the workshops or whatever the activities are that will allow you to get from here's kind of the idea to here is a specific product concept. Now, that product concept may not be realizable today. There may be an inventive step needed, and that's why I've shown an invent step, which ultimately gets you to the point of having a working prototype. And that is something that you can then say, okay, we know how it works. We've got a version of it working. Maybe there's some aspects missing, but we've basically reduced it to practice. Now we can kick off a product development program. And so in the next few slides, and by the way, I think I'll probably talk for about 35, 36 minutes in total, depending on how fast I go. There might be time for 1 or 2 questions at the end, but what I hope to do in the next few slides is just talk about some of the things you can do in these dream, listen, refine, and invent stages to do a better job of the product innovation process and not be so dependent on these unpredictable moments of genius. So if we're going to be talking about innovation tools, there is some mystery around tools and techniques. And I think one of the things you have to be careful of, you risk moving from a world where innovation hinges on these creative geniuses to a world where innovation hinges on the gurus of the innovation tools. And I don't think that is a helpful transition to make. You shouldn't end up still dependent on an elite crew of people to help you innovate. And I think innovation tools should be a democratizing thing that help us all do a better job in our daily lives. So yeah, you will have seen some of these tools out there, TRIZ, behavioral archaeology, unfocused groups, and these things can be a little bit intimidating. I'll talk a little bit in a moment about what some of the right tools are in my mind and the right type of tool for you to adopt, but I think it is a very personal thing. But perhaps I just ought to say briefly what these tools are useful for. They're used for things like uncovering unmet user needs. They're used to help us dream, to aspire regarding brand directions that our company could move in. They help us to identify technical solutions to a problem. They help us sometimes to find new applications for technology. So you will find that there are decks of cards available, literal decks of cards available to help you master a wide range of innovation tools and methodologies. You'll see on the background to this slide, there's the IDEO deck. It's, I believe, 51 method cards. And I don't want to knock these decks of cards and these innovation tool sets. They can be very useful. I, at one point, categorized some innovation tools that I was aware of, including the IDEO set, and I came up with about 60 methodologies that I was aware of, and you probably could go further than that. You probably can't read the small print on the graph on the right, and it's not really intended that you can, but this is just to show you that as a little exercise a couple of years ago, I mapped out these innovation tools to see what they were trying to do, and I classified them on these two axes that you can see on the diagram. So they go from introverted tools, where fundamentally they are about helping you look inwards and do a better job thinking about something perhaps on your own, or they can be extroverted tools where the fundamental point of them is they're tools that help you better interact with actual people, perhaps product stakeholders, for example, product users. And the tools can be intuitive, that is, they are there to help you feel what other people are feeling, or they can be rational, that is, they're there to help you understand how other people might interact with a product. And there's a whole spectrum out there. Now, you don't need to have internalized a deck of 51 method cards to be a good innovator. And my advice on this topic is you just need a small number of tools that work for you. And even stepping back from that, you just need to take a slightly systematic and more structured approach to the way you're going about innovation, and to have a method and to have a process, and use those techniques to help you improve the quality with which you explore the innovation space in which you're trying to work. You know, intuition can be very powerful. It can often tell us, you know, what we think are the most likely areas where good ideas are going to result. But a good complement to that is some diligence and some structured thinking. They can go a long way to help you bottom out the stuff that's non-intuitive and the categories ideas that you might not immediately think about. So let's talk about some tools. And this first one is in the dream category that I alluded to. And what this tool is for, and this is a very loose tool. You can use this however you like it, but loosely speaking, this tool is a structured approach to help us drive better exploration of the idea space and to map out the ideas that we're creating for a product or a product range. So what we've got here is a matrix that categorizes new product ideas. In this case, it's for a baby product, and this relates loosely to a project I was involved with, you know, many years ago. But I think it's a nice illustration, but it could be any category of product. So the axis along the top there is trying to explore an interesting set of categories of product idea. So we're looking for ideas in baby products, and we're asking, at what point in the day in the life of the baby does this product actually come into play? Could it be sleep time? Could it be changing a nappy? Could it be out and about? Could it be meal times, play, or perhaps learning, bath time? And then could the product also leak into the areas outside the baby itself, into some kind of support or help for the parent, perhaps when the baby's not with the parent or when the baby's gone to sleep. So that's meant to be, and you can use a day in the life analysis to get to, and we'll talk more about that later, but you can use a day in the life analysis to get to some good touch points in the life of the user, or the life of the baby, to think about where innovation might be possible. But then on a second axis, we've got an independent categorization system, and the rows here are intended to be what's called MECE, that is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So these are meant to be an independent set of categories to the first axis, also designed to be a pretty complete set. So in this case, we're saying, well, are we actually thinking about a product, or could it even be something other than a product, a service? That's the bottom row. If it's a product, is it a consumable product, which perhaps is the main category that this company might play in today, or could it be a durable product that we keep for a long time? And if it's a consumable, could it be lotions and potions, fluid consumables that we might be into today, or could it be something different? Could it be a wipe, for example, or some other solid? We're familiar with razors and razor blades. So you will tend to find that if you brainstorm ideas for, let's say, a new baby product, and you do so without imposing a category system, the ideas will tend to land in channels. They'll land in areas where people are highly familiar with the product already being. They'll land in, if you run brainstorms on this, you'll find people come up with their pet ideas, and those will come out, and you'll find little adjustments around existing product ideas. But if you've mapped out a space in a structured way like this, and you can literally do this in a workshop session if you want to, you can literally put post-its on a wall chart and map them out onto this space. But or you can do this stuff offline. If you deliberately set out to explore the space more completely, you will find that you can actually generate ideas across a much wider spectrum of a much wider coverage of the innovation space. And so that is what I would advocate when you're trying to come up with new product ideas. You want to really think about the categories of ideas you want to be generating, and deliberately workshop categories of ideas that cover the space thoroughly. Make sure you don't just get channeled into existing well-known, well-trodden areas. Now, that kind of exercise is only viable if you've got a good understanding of consumer needs. And some of the audience, I'm sure, will be very familiar with these types of product journey technique and ethnography and day in the life analysis and all the things you can do to get better in touch with customer needs. But it is surprising, actually, that in product categories, major products from major companies, you will sometimes find that the company finds it hard to stay in touch with end users in a very concrete and real way, and that it becomes difficult to really understand all the ins and outs of how a product's used and what the issues with it are and what the benefits are. And so here what we're looking at is a product journey. I'm not intending anyone to read any of the print on this, but it's really just to show a very diligent exercise mapping out a product journey. This is actually based on one that we at 42T just completed recently, and we're following a product all the way from manufacture through to its ultimate disposal. And so the product starts with its ingredients being produced in an outer pack manufacturer and with an ingredient manufacturer that produces the elements that go inside the pack. Those are then all brought together into a packaging and assembly facility. The product is then shipped to a customer headquarters and then is farmed out from there to various different types of store location, and is ultimately selected by installers for use. In this case, it's on a construction site by a professional installer who uses the product. And in this particular case, it was at the site, the construction site, where our client had some feedback that the product was resulting in too much landfill waste, that people had a frustration that although the product was very good, they were not able to recycle a key plastic element of the product's packaging because the recycling facilities weren't present at the work sites where these products are being used. And so what a day in the life or product journey analysis like this allows you to do is to really understand how the product is interacting with all the different stakeholders all the way through, including the customer, but also storage locations and the different, perhaps even weak points in manufacturing processes. You can find all kinds of unexpected facts and uncover unmet needs if you put the time in to work out what this process looks like, and then actually go and observe and interview and listen and go to the sites in question and really document what's going on there. And through that documentation, you can really uncover some interesting stuff. So from this particular project, a bunch of insights came out of it. The insights range from the way that products tend to hang around in vans but are not very convenient to store in vans, through to the product sometimes being left outside for quite long periods of time. And so the packaging actually does have to be waterproof, even if we're going to think about getting rid of this outer plastic pack that's causing the recycling problem and the landfill problem. The product's still going to have to be waterproof if it's used the way it is today. On the other hand, if we're thinking about kicking off an innovation program to get rid of this landfill related problem, perhaps we can draw on these insights and recombine different combinations and subsets of these insights into interesting avenues for product innovation that will not only solve the landfill problem, but also make the product better when you take into account the real journey that the product undergoes as it goes from manufacture through to ultimate disposal. So, for example, in this project, I can't talk about the actual detail of the ideas and the avenues that we came up with, but could the product move to a much larger pack with a metered dosing system instead of having individual portions being carried to work sites? If you move to a larger pack, it means you can more accurately dose, which means you don't waste the actual product itself. It also means the packaging becomes a more substantial item that might be more amenable to a formal recycling process. And from this project, there were a number of innovation avenues come out. And that's really the point of a project like this. It's meant to be a primer for the actual product innovation exercise that will generate the ideas that will solve the problems and meet the needs that we've uncovered. So moving on to the refined stage, this is where we're workshopping ideas, trying to improve ideas, get to a clear product concept. There are some subtle skills around the way that you run workshops and improve ideas. And by the way, all this stuff can carry on all through the worst periods of a pandemic. We were surprised by how well we could work with the online tools and keep brainstorming activity going. You know, some of the audience, I'm sure, will know these general guidances, but I'm going to briefly run through them. I think the first thing, and this resonates with the other things I've been saying, you have to prepare your workspace, be it the physical space where you're going to be running a workshop, be it the innovation space that you're using in Miro or another online tool. You have to think about what the topics are that you're going to be workshopping, what the subsets of ideas are that you expect to come out of each of those, and how you're going to do a thorough coverage of the ideation space as you proceed through your project. When you're in the workshop, there should be a few things that are top of mind. So don't leave ideas behind. Capture even elements of ideas that are incomplete, because we may be able to assemble those later. Try to catch each other's ideas so that more than one person has heard and understood the idea and we don't get duplicates. If you're working in person, make sure that you're not doing tiny scrawls, but writing big in marker pen so that people can see what's been written. Don't criticize other people's ideas. Sometimes there will be ideas that seem kind of stupid. It actually does take a degree of bravery to come forward and put forward what seems like a silly idea in a brainstorm. And if people are willing to do that, we shouldn't put them down for it, but instead should try to move the conversation onto what the key problem is with that idea and how you would go about tackling it. And finally, don't let that take you down a rabbit hole. You've got to keep things moving. And so you know, don't get caught on one topic. Try to keep the workshop moving and make sure you're really covering the innovation space broadly as you work through the workshop. So a lot of words on this one. The slide deck, I believe, is available if anyone wants to have a look at some of these points afterwards, but I'll try and touch on a few points, things you can do before and after a workshop that can really help you do a better job. I think at the beginning of any innovation project, requirements capture is really important. Now that means, what are the must-haves, what are the like-to-haves? When we asking the question, when we create ideas in this project, what ideas are in and what ideas are out? What are directions we don't want to go? That's really important because it focuses the ideation into fruitful areas where they're likely to be seen positively and seen as not a waste of time having created them. But it also allows filtering and ranking of the ideas. You know, if you've said that it's got to be manufacturable on an existing machine, maybe that's really important. And so an idea can be assessed on that criterion if we've really thought about that as we work through the ideation. Another thing, though, that these criteria do is they allow you to test the boundaries of where the innovation, the ideation work is going. And what that means is you can't afford to be too strict and rigid about these requirements as you go through an innovation program. Don't take everything literally. You've got to be able to push the boundaries. If someone says you must be able to fit 200 of this product onto a pallet, you know, well, maybe that would be nice. If the idea is amazing and if the product is going to be groundbreaking, maybe we don't care how the palletization works, you know. So just be careful when you're told that must have this or must not have that. Use that as perhaps in some cases even as fuel for the innovation exercise. After the workshops are complete, you have to assemble fragments of ideas into concepts. There's probably going to be some kind of workup stage. We don't want just to post it. What we'd like is nice concept sheets that allow an idea to be explained sufficiently to know roughly how it works, what its pros and cons are, and perhaps some kind of traffic light assessment of whether this appears to fit the criteria or not. And ultimately, certainly the way 42T does this is we tend to score and rank ideas against the original criteria using a scoring matrix. Looks complicated. It's not particularly complicated, but it is rigorous. And it does mean that you can pull out ideas that on the face of it have scored the best against the criteria we set. Having said that, this is an excellent opportunity at the end of a project, or perhaps at the midpoint, if we're talking about screening and ranking 100 ideas. It's an excellent opportunity to say, well, did we get the criteria right? Are there ideas in here that superficially don't score too well, but everyone loves them? Because there's a lot to be said for ideas that have popular support inside an organization. Sometimes it can be the right thing to do to take these forward, ideas like that are well liked, even if on the face of it the criteria aren't met. So moving on to the invent stage, where now we're trying to use structured approaches to create a better quality of often technical ideas. So again, we're talking about the way 42T approaches this. The way I tend to approach this is a MECE analysis again. By MECE, just to remind you, that means that we're looking for a mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive set of categories of idea so that we can put our ideas in context and say, well, this technical challenge, you can do it this way, this way, this way, or this way. And here, you know, I don't intend you to read the small print. Here we have a technical challenge that we were set, which was around keeping a product cool in transit. And we had two top-level categories of approach to how that might be doable. And then each of those has been broken down and broken down further and broken down further. The way that tends to work is you can't expect to have a sort of godlike view at the beginning of the project and to understand all of the branches in this spider diagram or in this box diagram in advance. The way it's supposed to work is that you use it iteratively. You think, well, what do I think are the right ways that this could in principle be done? And then you try and come up with ideas and look at what's out in the actual world and see if they fit the category system and keep expanding the category system until you've got something that would appear to be a complete set of categories. Normally, this kind of exercise is a prelude to actually going into the lab and trying to reduce things to practice. That, of course, is in some ways the most important step. And, you know, none of this displaces the need for really competent technical people that know intuitively what's likely to work and not work. There is still a very important role for that throughout this process. But a bit of structure like this, a bit of analysis does go a long way in trying to make sure that you have looked in all the right places and you can show you have as well. So another angle on the invent step is thinking about how you're going to innovate from or moving forward from a current position with a product, and perhaps add new features to it or develop it in unexpected ways. So imagine that, you know, you are here, that's meant to be the marker in the middle of this diagram, and you're thinking about moving in stages away from where you are, releasing new versions of your products into the world. And the thing is that in reality, that can be a bit of a minefield, because there are things out there that are going to trip you up, perhaps even blow you up. Now, of course, that minefield is metaphorical, but we're thinking here about impediments, things that aren't going to work the way you expected, or perhaps patterns that are going to be out there that are going to make life difficult as soon as you move too far from where you are. Now, I was originally drawn to this idea by a former colleague of mine, Paul Ferris. You can look him up. He's an academic in the United States now, but a specialist in product innovation and development. And one of the things Paul said, which is a little bit kind of a flabbergasting idea in a way, is that a minefield is the safest place you can be. And you kind of think, well, what does Paul mean by that? And of course, what he means is he knows it's the safest place you can be if you know where all the mines are. Now, you know, I am not saying, by the way, that I would like to live in a house surrounded by mines. I think there's many opportunities to be tripped up and caught out, and we like our lives to be kept simple. But I think there is an essential truth to this, which is that if you understand where the mines are, it allows you to move forward in the knowledge that you've got a good chance you're going to be safe. So the type of technical MECE analysis that we've talked about can be very effective in figuring out what a patent is actually protecting, perhaps your competitor's patent, and either breaking or working around that patent, or if you apply this kind of technique to yourself, reinforcing your own patents by pretending to be the opponent that's trying to innovate around it, thus coming up with alternative versions of the same idea that solve the problem a different way. The key to that is really to, in most cases, to explore what is actually claimed by the patent. The claims are, for the most part, what is protected. And if you can deconstruct the patent's claims and think about the alternative ways that each of those claims could be realized, could be achieved, you may be able to find ways around the patent, and indeed even get some new intellectual property on the different way of solving the problem. In one case that 42T worked on a few years ago, we were able to find alternative approaches to a very important industry patent, at least important to our client who couldn't work around it. The industry at the time believed the patent was pretty much impregnable, but with this kind of structured approach and really just trying to bottom out, well, what is actually patented and could you do that a different way? We were able to find a way around it with them, and they now have their own intellectual property that builds on that, and a €1 billion business that hinges on having some intellectual property to protect it. And of course, hinges also on not being in the space that was protected by the opponent. And I hope in part that's helped us cycle back to where we started, which is what we're looking for. Of course, it's not all about the money, but I think in business, money is oxygen. And what we're talking about is how can you get to the point where you have €1 billion, €1 billion, £1 billion new business that has come from an innovation exercise. And that's where the Teslas and the Googles and the Netflixes have managed to get to. So to try and draw this into some sort of conclusions and recap what I've been talking about, I've laid out a vision of what's inside the black box of innovation that ultimately is still spitting out product development programs that can be executed, that lead to a finished product that then can be put into production and turn into a successful business, sure. But inside that black box, we can actually apply some structured tools, some structured approaches to try and improve the quality of the ideas that we create and the prototypes that we ultimately try out, and to reduce our dependence on the genius innovators and the gurus. I identified 4 phases within that box, and these are not by any means gospel. Dream, listen, refine, and invent. Feel free to categorize those in different ways, but I think those are all important activities. And some simple structured approaches, some of which I've talked about, they're not going to turn you into the next Elon Musk, but they do help you to just do a slightly better job with a team that's already pretty good. And to, if you focus on the prize and if you focus on areas to innovate where there is an upside, if you can come up with an interesting new product proposition, I think it is worth the diligence. It is worth thinking about the space that you're exploring and really bottoming out the different categories of ideas and the different categories of consumer need that you're going to need to be armed with if you're going to move forward with an innovation process. So we've got time for some very brief questions now. I think this session ends in 3 or 4 minutes, but do also feel free to reach out to me afterwards. My email address is there on the slide, alan.hart@42t.com. And with that, I think we can move to any questions. So one question that I've been asked is, where have you seen these types of innovation tool being most useful? I think it's very uneven where certainly the companies I've worked with, you get a very uneven experience of how structured they're being in the innovation process, and the innovation process works differently in different industries. I would say in consumer products, FMCG, CPG, a lot of consumer research goes on. There is quite often an element of do the consumer research and then throw it over the wall to R&D. That varies enormously by company, but there does tend to be quite a well-characterized consumer research process that may not always be perfectly tuned to uncover specific unmet needs that R&D can act on. Just to throw in another answer to that question, on the refine process, where we were talking about the ways that you do the brainstorming, I think most companies know how to run a good workshop. They don't necessarily do the best job of structuring the space in which they're thinking well in advance and really making sure that they're covering all the bases. So hopefully that answers that question. Do we have any more questions from the audience? No, I think that's it for now. So unless anyone else has got any other questions, this session is going to come to an end in a couple of minutes, and I think we will end it there. Thanks everyone for listening, and enjoy the rest of the event.